Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man back. He is the founder and executive director of Power of the Future. It's Daniel Turner. Daniel, how are you? Good to see you again.
Joe, it's great to be on with you. Thank you so much for having me back.
You're very welcome. We had you on, I think, in June. We haven't had you since, and we've had debates since then. I think we might have actually had you on before the debate that ended Joe Biden's career, which was actually kind of crazy. It was a few days before that. Recently, we had the debate between Kamala Harris and former President Trump. And Harris wants us to believe that she's now not for banning fracking. She, in fact, is for fracking. Pennsylvania, I love the fracking. So we know what her history is. We know that she's always said she wants to get rid of fossil fuels. She was very stern in 19 and 20 that she wanted to get rid of fracking. Let's start here. What is the argument against fracking? I know that it's natural energy that we get out of, doing some mechanism to rocks and rock formations and everything else. It's energy that's gettable, and we've been getting it. The idea that you can light water on fire where fracking happened has been debunked over and over again. What is the argument against fracking? Just get away from fossil fuels?
It's get away from fossil fuels. Yeah, they know that if they abolish fracking for whatever reason, it will shut down the industry. Right now, half of our oil and more than 2/3 of our natural gas wells are fracked. And all that means, really quickly, fracking is not a complicated process. It was actually discovered during the Civil War. And so it's not exactly even a new practice, although we've perfected it. And all it means is that when you're drilling a well and you're going 8,000 feet below ground, sometimes they find literally pools or pockets of the hydrocarbons that they're trying to extract. But sometimes it leaches into the rocks. Sometimes it's dissipated. Fracking is removing the drill bit and pumping in a lot of water. It's literally water, so much so that a famous governor back in the day, John Hickenlooper of Colorado, Democrat, but pro-fracking, he actually drank fracking fluid at a press conference to show this is not poisonous chemicals. They pump water into that opening, and it breaks up the rocks so that all of these hydrocarbons can now make their way to that pool and you can extract them. It's not complicated. It's not scary. I don't think Kamala Harris actually knows what it even is.
It's interesting because I guarantee you're right, but she knows that fracking equals bad, and saying that you think it's bad and that you'll ban it might equal votes, and it certainly does equal votes for those on the left. What's interesting to me is nobody talks about how badly this affects communities when you stop fracking. We've got the Eagle Ford not far from where I sit. And that became an entire community, a boom town. We had people showing up from far and wide, getting new careers, making money, raising families, building churches and shopping centers. It really does help out an entire geographical community. And going against it and bringing in the Biden policies and the Harris policies has harmed places like that, has harmed them badly. And if they keep on going with this attack on fracking and the natural goodness that I think God enriched us with, it's going to end up being more people laid off or fired, like stopping the Keystone XL pipeline. So the argument really is just for votes. As you said, they probably don't really know what it is. And I know that you're doing a good job with this, but how can we all do a better job of educating people on the safety, the usage of, and the abundance of fossil fuels?
Yeah, asking questions is the most important way. When you hear someone say that they're opposed to it, confront them. Why do you oppose it? Walk me through the process. And this is what Kamala Harris can't do, which is why she hasn't done any serious interviews. Right? She was so clear in 2019. Her exact quote is, "There's no doubt I'm in favor of a fracking ban." So clearly she had enough data to make that decision, but now she says she no longer supports that. Well, then the data must have changed. So an honest journalist would ask, well, Madam Vice President, what new information did you receive to change your mind? An honest journalist would say, okay, Kamala Harris has flip-flopped on fracking, but Governor Hochul in New York, she still supports a fracking ban. So Governor Hochul, what data do you look at that Kamala Harris is not looking at, and how come you don't agree with her position? Fracking is still banned in New York State. Governor Cuomo banned it, right? Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania, he flip-flopped in months before the election. Josh Fetterman, whatever Fetterman's first name is, the
John. It's John.
John Fetterman. Same deal. He flip-flopped right before the election. He suddenly was in favor of fracking. So these politicians know if you want to win Pennsylvania, you have to support fracking. But gosh, you kind of wish you had more.
You have to say you support fracking. You don't actually have to support it. You just have to say you do, right?
Yeah. And you wish you had more respect for the voters than to treat them like children, right? I mean, you know when your parents would lie to you to make you go to bed because they just wanted to have a drink and they'd be like,
Yes.
"Oh, go to bed," right? That's how they treat us, right? They tell us all these things that we want to hear so that we'll shut up and get out of their hair. And that's the American people deserve a hell of a lot more than what we're getting from our elected officials.
It's Daniel Turner. Go to powerofthefuture.com, powerofthefuture.com. You're an energy expert. I don't expect you to be a name expert, so it is John Fetterman. And Hochul is going to be Hochul like local. I don't know why it's spelled that way, but that's what it is. But you're right. She's another radical that's against it, but probably will say she's for it to help Kamala Harris. So at the end of the day, I think you're right. So when somebody says, I'm against Second Amendment, I'm against this issue, the border, I'm against it, just ask them why. And then shut up and let them answer. And they never really can. And you're right. Kamala Harris said directly to that questioner, who is, by the way, from some green energy lobby, she said, I am 100% going to ban fracking. You didn't say, oh, I'm thinking about it, or I'd like to. I'm going to ban fracking. And you saw what the American public's response was. I mean, she was kicked out of the primary season before Iowa. So she was somebody who, because of that, was completely unpopular. Now, when she sat down with Dana Bash over at CNN, she claimed that she's changed her position on fracking. And when Bash pushed her back ever so slightly, she said, well, did you learn something new? Did you educate yourself? What was it that you found out? And her answer was, I'm not going to ban fracking. Yeah. I mean, can we take that to the bank, do you think?
Well, and she also said her values haven't changed.
Right.
So I don't know what that means, right? Your values haven't changed, but my positions have. And again, these are really serious policy positions. I went through the numbers earlier of how much of our fossil fuels come from fracking. So to take a firm position like I am opposed to fracking, I will ban it, that has enormous consequences. We're not talking about, did you like The Godfather? Are you a fan of pineapple on pizza, right? These are not sort of indifferent or inconsequential positions.
Right.
EV mandates is another one, right? The fracking ban. Kamala Harris has changed on all this, and I'm glad you mentioned Second Amendment. I don't do gun issues as a position, but I do live on a farm in rural Virginia. I am a Second Amendment believer. I am well armed.
Yeah.
Certainly she's a gun owner now. I wish President Trump had asked her, "Oh, you own guns? What did you buy?" Right?
Well, the other day, Jim Acosta actually had an accidental bit of journalism because he asked somebody from the Kamala Harris campaign, when did she have the gun, or when did she buy the gun, and what kind is it? And the person said, she just said, she loves the Second Amendment. So you're right. These people will say anything to get elected. By the way, it's Daniel Turner, founder and executive director of Power of the Future. Go to powerofthefuture.com. I've got to bring up Pete Buttigieg. This is one of my favorite interviews lately. I did a TikTok and an Instagram video on this, and it's done very well. Buttigieg is asked, how is it that we've allotted $7.5 billion and we only have 8 charging stations built? And his answer was, that's right on track. Daniel, maybe I'm missing something. Does a charging station cost about $1 billion to build? Then he did some nonsense about, private sector built 190,000, blah, blah, blah. The fact is they did this Inflation Reduction Act that didn't reduce anything. It was a green energy thing is what it was. They're trying to say by 2030, which is, as I look at the calendar, a little over 5 years from now, they're going to have 500,000 charging stations, and that infrastructure is just going to be built overnight, I guess. But they've already spent $7.5 billion. Is there a reason that you can tell me why we're going through this expense? Well, we know that it's not logically going to happen by 2030. The money's just there, and they say it's going to happen, but it's not happening.
It's not remotely going to happen. And the fact that we've spent this much money and have 8 to show for it, unless, and I will hold out this, unless they're really, really nice charging stations. I mean, they could look like one of Saddam's palaces, right?
Yeah, they're lined with gold. That's okay. Yeah, okay, I got you.
But it's infuriating, right? And what Pete Buttigieg is incapable of acknowledging, as well as Kamala Harris, as well as Joe Biden, this is what happens when government decides to get involved, right? Government's never built a gas station, and yet we have gas stations seemingly everywhere you want them. I was just in rural New Mexico for the last couple of days. I'm rural Alaska now. I can find gas stations, and not one of them was put there by a governor or by a government commission.
Right.
It's the free market that did that, right? So, but the government now thinks they know how to build the equivalent in the electric vehicle world, and that's impossible. Everything government builds is a complete failure. So Pete Buttigieg, it's not his money. And he doesn't care if it doesn't hit a target or not. As the great Limbaugh used to tell us, the left only gets to be judged on their intentions. And Pete Buttigieg will say his intentions are right.
He'll say his intentions are where they have to be to get some more votes. It is, again, Daniel Turner. Go to powerthefuture.com. We often hear President Trump talk about the supply of energy that we have beneath our land. I can't think of the guy's name. A geologist about 10 years ago said in Anwar alone, you've got probably 200 years of oil. How much do we have? Daniel, do we know how much oil, fossil fuel, natural resources, natural gas, LNG, all of that stuff we have beneath where we sit and stand?
Yes, the estimates of places where we're actually actively extracting oil, gas, coal are enormous. In Pennsylvania alone, there's enough natural gas to power America and our allies for centuries, and that's just in Pennsylvania. The problem is that we can't get a lot of that natural gas to ports to send it around the world, right? We've blocked Mountain Valley Pipeline. Previous governors have blocked pipelines into Virginia, into Maryland, et cetera. So that's the problem that we're facing. But we have enough oil, gas, and coal to power America and our allies for centuries. Now, maybe in those upcoming centuries, we'll discover a new technology. We probably will. And that's why my organization is called Power the Future. I don't know what that new energy source is going to be, but I guarantee you the genius who discovers it is living right now a fossil fuel lifestyle. And if we punish fossil fuel now, we are punishing our future.
It is Daniel Turner, again, powerthefuture.com. Are you an anti-electric guy, or are you all of the above?
I'm an anti-wind and solar. I think they're complete failures.
Let me ask you. I want to interrupt. I want to jump right in because we're going to run out of time. But we were just on a road trip, and we saw some of these windmills. And those are ugly. I think they're ugly. I think they take beautiful green land and make it ugly. But let's say you love the way they look. They don't really work, do they? Are they worth the money that we're spending on these things?
No, that's why I oppose them. If you want to get something on your private land, a lot of people are putting in solar panels. Go for it. I'm not going to stop you what you're doing on your land. But the idea that we're going to power the nation on wind and solar is a joke. And all you need to do is see a wind farm where none of the turbines are turning. And the advocates will say, well, yeah, the wind is not blowing. And that's true. But our electricity use at that moment has not declined. So something has to make up that delta. And that delta is reliable fossil fuels and reliable nuclear. Not to mention wind and solar are made in communist China with slave labor, with markets that are controlled by the Chinese, most of them extracted from sub-Saharan Africa by children. So, yeah, I think wind and solar have a lot of drawbacks, and I would never support a dime of taxpayer dollars going to them.
Please forgive me for interrupting, but I had to because we just, with our own eyeballs, saw these big, ugly things. And you're right, half of them aren't turning. We know, listen, did we not learn from the big Texas freeze a few years ago that all of the windmills froze? You had all these coal-fired stations that were shut down 3 and 4 years earlier. You couldn't fire those back up. The LNG couldn't be delivered because something else broke down. And people were dying. We were freezing in parts of Texas that we didn't expect to freeze. I was doing my talk show from my cell phone. From my house. I couldn't leave the house. So did we not learn something where we have a backup plan with all the resources we have in Texas specifically? We had no backup plan to fire something up if the solar didn't work because there's no sun, and if the windmills didn't work because they broke or they froze. And somebody said, "Oh, they forgot to put the antifreeze in the windmill." I don't care why it happened. People literally froze to death, some of them. So did we not learn our lesson from that?
No, unfortunately, sadly, Texas has not, and they have doubled down on wind and solar, and there's a lot of money to be made in wind and solar, and I understand that. But Texas and the rest of America just needs to look at other places in the world that have been doing this longer. Particularly, let's go to Germany, and they have a 25-year head start on us, and Germany is shutting down its wind, and it is reopening up its coal plants. And after 25 years, the Germans, who are about as green as you could get, if they haven't been able to make it work, I don't understand why any governor, especially a Republican governor, thinks they've discovered some magic formula. But this is the evil of all of that D.C. money, because they are buying off Republicans left and right, buying off their silence, saying here's free tax dollars if you just put up these wind farms or these solar farms. So we have a valuable lesson to learn from our friends who have made this tragic mistake. And you're right, 700 people plus froze to death in Texas during those days. And there's not a monument to them.
Unnecessarily.
Nope. No one rioted, no one protested, no one built them a statue. We just forget because they're nameless, powerless victims, and those are who the left is always comfortable with as necessary casualties in their ideological war.
No, we should never in this country in the modern times have people die because they froze to death when all you had to do is make sure you had backup energy that we know works and it's reliable. Let me ask you this, Daniel. When you talk about Germany reopening coal plants and building new coal plants, there are some reports that say China's building a new coal-fired plant every week. Is that true?
They're building the equivalent of it, of what an actual coal plant size is, and they are. They're building tremendous amount of coal plants for a very specific reason. Coal works. Now, China does not burn coal the way America does, and this notion in America that coal is dirty is an absolute lie. We burn coal very cleanly in America. 30% of our electricity still comes from coal, and just if you could find me one kid who was sick from coal, he would be on CNN. They'd be camped on his front door every single day. So coal is clean, and we have to get rid of that. Now, China doesn't do it the way we do, but why is China using coal? Because it works. And in those coal factories, they are making EVs and wind and solar and selling that crap to us. China is not going to risk its manufacturing economy on unreliable wind and solar, and yet America's falling for this lie.
Daniel Turner, last question for you, Daniel. About a minute on this, if you don't mind. When we hear nuclear, we think Chernobyl, we think 3 Mile Island, we think bad. Well, what are you going to do with the rods after they're spent? Are you going to take them on a train through Nevada or whatever? People are afraid of the word nuclear, but you and I both know it's the cleanest form of energy out there. How can we assure people that that's the future?
Well, we have a couple thousand young men and women right now on submarines, on aircraft carriers, and they're all powered by nuclear. And we don't seem to be too concerned, and they don't seem to be too concerned. So if it's good enough for our Navy, we should be comfortable. Secondly, France, more than 80% of its electricity comes from nuclear power. And, not to play on stereotypes, Joe, but if the French aren't afraid of nuclear, I don't think America should be either.
Every time France is in trouble, they talk to us. All right, I said last question. I mean it this time. 30 seconds on this. How quickly do you think Trump could put the Keystone XL pipeline back in place, and how much would that help us?
It would help us tremendously. The question is whether or not the company wants to go for it. They've had the rug pulled out from under them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, I just don't trust government again. I hope not. I hope not. And it could be up and running. If Trump's inaugurated in January, it could probably be up and running by a year from now.
PowerTheFuture.com. PowerTheFuture.com is Daniel Turner. Daniel, thanks a million for the knowledge. Very, very important that we keep people up on exactly what's going on both sides of the aisle going into next year and the years beyond. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, brother. We're back after this. Stay right here.